So with that, that should have started recording. Yes, it did. It's always nice when things actually work when they're supposed to. So here's today's agenda. So first, I guess I should introduce myself. Hi, I'm Melinda Kelly. I'm with DOC, and I'm joined today by Cassidy McSturdy, who's also with DOC. And I think the two of us are probably familiar to you. I think we've worked with almost all of you through this process, through the pre-proposal process and everything else. So we're looking forward to working with you over the next few years. Cassidy and I will be the primary, or two of the three grant managers, actually, I should say. Matt Donahoe is going to also be working with some of you on your grants. He is off on a nice vacation, so he's not joining us today. So our goal today is to go through, pretty much kind of go through the nuts and bolts of the grant agreement process, which I think all of you have sort of had some conversation with your grant managers. So this is a good chance to ask some additional questions if you have them. And then also to talk about the grant management processes. What that looks like during the course of your grant. And then we'll open it up for questions and discussion. Also, we're joined today by Amy McPhee, and is Serena in? I didn't see her. Anyway, Amy McPhee from Cultivate is, they've provided technical assistance to a lot of you all in this round and also previous rounds that have been just an awesome addition to the team and been really helpful for DOC and also for the planning grantees. They've been really great in working to engage planning community and assist in developing many of the SALC projects. Amy's going to just talk briefly at the end about early plans for peer-to-peer workshops, which we'll be holding this year for you all. So looking forward to hearing more about that. So first of all, congratulations. This is one of the largest cohorts of the planning grantees in the program's 9 years. I think it was round 6, we actually had 10 planning grants. So you guys are just shy of that, but still nonetheless very impressive. Grantees include city, county, and regional planning organizations, and projects include development of a range of things, including an agricultural element for a general plan, regional benefits study and toolkit, and a variety of conservation plans and strategies. So if you're not already familiar with some of the other folks in the cohort, you can go to, we have, Cassidy's going to pop a link in the chat if she hasn't already, where you can, it's a PDF that shows, it's project summaries of all the different planning grants that were awarded this year. So it might be interesting for you to look at, and you can, reach out to each other if you have questions. I think this is a great opportunity for people to sort of, to work together and learn stuff from each other. And then this pretty slide hasn't been updated to reflect the round 9. So this is just showing everything that's been awarded to date across the program, or through round 8 rather, through the program. And that's acquisition, capacity, and planning grants, all of them. With around 9 awards in December, these totals have grown quite a bit. We have more than 200 acquisition projects, totaling over 244,000 acres to be conserved. And then in this round, SGC awarded 38 acquisition grants, 19 capacity grants, and the 8 planning grants that are represented here. Total amount awarded through these 9 rounds for all components of the program is around 500 million, about $500 million, which is pretty exciting. And round 9 was one of our biggest years ever, with over $116 million being awarded across the 3 programs. Rounds 1 through 9 reflect, so what you'll see on the right-hand side here is a map that was created. It was put into the packet for when the awards were given. So you'll see that it says recommended for funding. Obviously, these were awarded. So the shaded areas show sort of the area of coverage for all the 30 planning grants that have already been awarded prior to this round. And then the little green dots are you guys. So we'll be able to expand into shaded areas in the future there. But as you can see, this is pretty good coverage across the state. We're excited to see that. Still more little spaces in there that can be filled in. Through these 9 rounds, as I said, 38 planning grants, a little over $10 million has been awarded. covers 29 counties, 7 cities, and then 2 tribal areas. So pretty excited to see what's been going on, and just excited to see it keep moving forward. So, and with that, I think I will hand it over to Cassidy to begin to talk about the grant agreement and grant management process.
Awesome. Thank you, Melinda. So this flowchart that you see here shows the major steps in the process of executing the grant agreement. So as stated previously, your grant managers reached out at this point to begin those conversations about developing your work plan and your budget, as well as any revisions to those documents that may be necessary. Those documents are incorporated into the grant agreement, so we do want to get those squared away at this point. The terms and conditions of the grant agreement are considered non-negotiable. However, those certain attachments will be customized for each project, so that's what we are generally working on at this point. Once you and your grant manager have agreed on any necessary revisions to your work plan and budget, and you've reviewed the draft grant agreement, your grant manager will then submit the grant agreement for DOC processing. Then it goes through the internal DOC review. Once approved by DOC, it will be sent by the grant manager to the grantee for signatures, and that's via DocuSign. And we'll be alerting you along the way of where that is in the process, so you can keep an eye out for those emails and the DocuSign invitation. Once the grantee has signed the DocuSign, or has DocuSigned the grant agreement, the DOC grant manager will then initiate the second internal and final routing, and that'll be for DOC signatures. The DOC signatory will sign last. Once the DOC has signed the grant agreement, your manager will send you an email with a digital copy of the fully executed grant agreement. Overall, this process from grant manager approval of the grant agreement, so you've got your budget and work plan finalized and reviewed, you've reviewed the grant agreement. From that point to the executed copy will generally take about 3 weeks to a month. So we do want you to keep that in mind when you're considering when you'd like to get started with work. The grant start date will be the date included in the grant agreement, or when DOC has signed the agreement, whichever comes last. So any work you wish to bill to the program should begin on or after that later date. So for example, if the grant term is to begin March 15th, 2024, and will extend through March 14th, 2026, the grant agreement is then signed by the director on March 5th. In that case, the start date of your grant would be March 15th as depicted on the grant agreement. Conversely, if the director signs it after that date, say on March 30th, then March 30th would be the beginning date and the beginning of where you'd be able to begin any billable work. We do allow some flexibility as to start and end dates with planning grants. So this is something you will want to communicate and work with your grant manager on. Some of you may be ready to go right away. Others might need a little extra time. Generally, we like to see these executed in March or April. However, we do allow until June to enter into grant agreement before you would risk forfeiting your award. So grant agreement does need to be entered into within 6 months of the award date. We also allow for potential to have a grant period of 3 years in order to allow for plenty of times to not only complete the projects and plans, but also allow time for council and board approvals, any MOUs or anything like that haven't been agreed upon yet. We've learned from projects in the past that sometimes these approvals can take time. Getting on schedules, delays, that maybe things get pushed out a little further. So we do encourage you to account for potential delays in those final approvals when you're working through developing your initial work plan. as grant extensions aren't necessarily guaranteed if you did need a little more time to complete that work. And then again, a few points to remember here. Please keep in mind that the individual who signs the grant agreement on behalf of the organization will also need to sign the invoices. We do have an authorized signatory form. You can fill that out as part of your grant agreement if there is anybody else on your team that you'd like to authorize to either sign invoices or be a point of contact in other ways, and that's all depicted within that grant agreement. So please be sure to fill that portion of the grant agreement out specific to what your department needs are likely going to be. It is beneficial to have a backup person, say somebody's out on, vacation leave, whatever it may be, but we leave that up to you to decide. And then diving into the work plan. So the work plan that's incorporated into the grant agreement will be based on this one submitted with the application. Staff through your application reviews may have noted some ineligible activities or some items that may require more clarification or areas where the total requested in the work plan doesn't match what's in the budget, whether that's time. We are actually revising our work plans to likely remove any budgetary information, just kind of leave all that in the budget. Work plan be more task, timeline, and deliverable specific. So your grant manager will work with you to remove any ineligible activities, address any items that need clarification, and ensure that the activities listed in the work plan correlate with the tasks and activities that are listed in the budget. The most common update that we see is need to adjust timelines. So depending on when you get into grant agreement, maybe within that application, it showed a January start date. We all know at this point that that's not feasible, most likely. So that would need to be updated in the grant agreement. So starting with when you're able to actually move into grant agreement.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
How do we know if we have to fix something in our work plan or in our budget?
So likely that would be something to work with your individual grant manager on. They may have already, I think with some of our grant managers and grantees, we've already kind of been working through those items and identifying them. So I would recommend reaching out to whoever your grant manager is, and they'll work with you to refine and finalize the work plan as well as the budget.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
For the question.
Yeah. And so then here we're moving on from work plan to that grant agreement budget. We have on the slide here an example budget. Please note that we've changed the formatting of the budget from the application to allow for a little more flexibility within each task, as well as for ease of invoicing over time. So any staff time should be consolidated into one line item within each of those tasks. And the staff titles and not to exceed rates are listed in a secondary table, which is at table 2 below. We do highly recommend that you put the anticipated fully encumbered rates over the next 2 to 3 years to account for any raises. We've seen in the past that this is often an area where change occurs. We then would have to go through a formal amendment process, which is pretty lengthy. Our best practice would be to avoid that if possible. So build in a little bit extra there. You can always invoice for a lower amount, but not a higher one without going through that amendment process. We also recommend that you include both staff and consultant line items for each task, regardless of whether you plan to use one or the other for your grant. This is because as circumstances at your organization change, sometimes things that were allocated to staff are then moved to consultants. And so again, by having it as a line item, we're able to move funds more easily between line items than we are to say add an entire line item, as that would require an amendment as well. And so I know we just had a question, but I did want to pause here for questions as well. That was a lot between work plan and budget. Maybe for a minute or so, if anybody did have any questions that arose, feel free to raise your hand. Tackle those. And if not, we can just move on. All right, so I'm going to move on to publicity. We will have a few other opportunities for questions as well. So if anything else pops up, definitely feel free to bring that up during our next little question break. If the grantee chooses to publicize the grant when awarded, any accomplishments of the planning programs or overall grant results after it's closed, grantees must coordinate that press release with the department. All press releases must be approved by DOC prior to distribution, and DOC and SGC must be alerted about and invited to participate in any and all press conferences related to the grant. Your grant agreement does include details of the publicity requirements, but definitely reach out to your grant manager. You know, it always is helpful. We can provide you resources, make that process a little bit easier, and also avoid any delays if we do need review time. Please note, grantees are required to use Strategic Growth Council, California Climate Investments, and DOC names and/or logos for all publications. That includes websites, signage, invitations, and other media related and public outreach products related to the grant. So again, staff can provide those logo files and any guidance on their usage directly to grant recipients in anticipation of those press releases. The department reviews those draft press releases to ensure that grantees have included the following. So the roles that the department, California Climate Investments, and the Strategic Growth Council have played in the planning grant. Specific language as noted in the grant agreement and SALC guidelines. So we do have specific language, whether it's short or long form, that you should be using. And California Climate Investments as the funding source, and include the California Climate Investments logo in the publication. Please note, as stated previously, the logo must comply with their usage guidelines, and those are found on the California Climate Investments webpage. We also request that you include the CCI Press email address on any distribution lists, so that they're notified when press releases and distributions have been sent out, as well as post the Twitter link on web pages related to the project. That's at CA Climate Investments. And then finally, please just let your grant manager know if you intend to publicize your project at this point. That way they can coordinate with the appropriate people early in the process. We're also happy to include SGC and DOC director quotes into your draft press releases, though that can require some additional time on our end. So please consider this and reach out to your grant manager with plenty of time for us to be able to get those quotes for you. And that's, now or at close of project, whenever it is that you may anticipate that need. Okay, and then moving on to grant management. So once you are into grant agreement, we've gone through that whole flowchart process that we showed earlier. So you'll want to think of your grant manager as a resource. We want to see your project and the grant management process go as smoothly as possible. So we're here to support you along the way. Generally, we like to set off a kickoff meeting shortly after you get into grant agreement, just to really introduce ourselves and set up for success as we move through the grant period. This meeting would include the grantee the main project manager, perhaps accounting, whoever might be handling invoicing, and anybody else on your team that you think would be beneficial to have on those meetings. While timing may vary by project, as well as where the project is in its process, typically we do a 30-minute check-in, either monthly or every 2 to 3 months. It's a great opportunity to share some highlights of the work you've been doing, check in on the work plan progress, provide deliverable status, and ask any questions, troubleshooting any issue areas kind of early. So we've really found that to be successful, having those regular check-in meetings. We'll be discussing invoicing in more detail in the next couple of slides, but the main thing to note is to work with your grant manager through the invoicing process, especially getting started. It can be a little bit difficult at first, knowing exactly what it is we're looking for, formatting all of that. Again, we're here as a resource, so we'll help along with those first few. We highly encourage you to send a draft of your first invoices unsigned prior to signing any final versions, as we often identify errors that need to be addressed, particularly in those first few. So reach out to your grant manager early if you have questions on eligible costs and any needed documentation in support of those invoices. You'll also need to send deliverables as they're completed, or in draft form for grant manager review and approval. We then file those and note those deliverables as having been met, and look at that against the work plan, make sure everything's on track. As noted earlier, the regular check-ins are a great time to provide updates on the work plan, describe any issues or delays. So please reach out early if you're experiencing delays or challenges. That way we can start helping to address things early as well. We realize that a lot of these plans involve many stakeholders, often require city or county board approvals, and delays can occur. So it's just important for us to know so that we can discuss updates to work plan timelines and decide if there's any other procedural requirements that we may have as if things are changing around.
Hey, I have a question.
Sure.
So you mentioned about the invoicing and things. Is this a reimbursable grant?
This is,
Okay.
yes.
All right. That's helpful to know as we're going through budgeting process.
Absolutely. Yeah, so
Thank you.
generally it would be after work is completed, and then we ask for timesheets, invoices, etc. But again, that may be something your grant manager can work with you on, more specific to your project and what your budget looks like, what sort of documentation they're going to need in order to reimburse. So then jumping into invoicing, we have here one of our great templates, kind of shows by task, cost category, etc. A really great breakdown of what's being invoiced that period, what's been invoiced to date, and then what's been allocated. So once you're in grant agreement, you should submit invoices regularly, but no more frequently than monthly. One thing to note is that you are not going to be able to submit invoices until 60 days after your grant agreement has been executed. So if you intend to submit your first invoice immediately following that 60-day waiting period, please let your grant manager know as soon as possible so they can work with you on that timing, make sure they've reviewed your drafts, etc. Payments on invoices submitted in June and July may be delayed, as that's when our accounting office and the controller's office shut down to handle year-end tasks. So that's especially important to know. Say you get into grant agreement in March, you have to wait your 60 days. You're getting right into that timeline. So something to be aware of. Our preference is generally that you would hold off on submitting invoices until after accounting opens its books again, which is usually mid-July. And Melinda, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we were asked to kind of stop processing invoices around, or stopped accepting invoices in around end of May, first week of June last year, if that was so that period,
That was
like first
last year.
week of
I mean,
June.
this year, yeah, and every year it's a little bit different, the time schedule, but that's the general rule of thumb. And then again, it open up in mid-July.
Great, thank you. Yes, just again, you can work with your grant manager, but something to keep in mind if you are hoping to get going with invoicing right away. Also, again, as noted earlier, we ask that you submit a draft unsigned invoice to your grant manager for review before submitting a final signed invoice for processing, particularly for those first few invoices. And that'll give your grant manager the opportunity to make sure your invoice meets our requirements without us having to reject it, and you having to go back and get multiple signatures, etc. So it's just nice to kind of send that draft in first. Please refer to the invoicing section of your grant agreement for additional information about what should be included in your invoice, and use the invoice template, if possible, included in the grant agreement when submitting invoices. The invoice template's 2 pages and includes a brief report on work completed along with the reimbursement request. So again, it kind of gives us that overview of what's being invoiced in this, what's been done to date, and what work was completed that this invoice is reimbursing for. So again, here's the example invoice based on the invoice template in the grant agreement. The total should correlate with submitted timesheets, subcontractor invoices, and other supporting documents. And you're generally in budget as long as the total reimbursement doesn't exceed what was approved per item and task in the budget that you worked on that was put into that grant agreement. So you do want to be aware of the budget in the grant agreement, making sure that you are not exceeding the allocated amount per task. And you can see that in this template as well. So that should help also. If you anticipate going over budget on a particular task, there may be opportunity to request a budget modification to shift funds from other tasks where feasible. Budget modification should be requested before you incur costs over the allocated total for that particular task, to ensure that it's been reviewed by your grant manager. Additionally, if you noted any match funding in your budget, we do ask that you send record of match spent down during each invoice period. We don't need timesheets or invoices for the match funding, but we do ask that you keep that on file in the event of an audit. So you will have to have that documentation. You just don't need to submit it to us with each invoice. And we can provide you a template spreadsheet for match tracking as well, if that's helpful. And then here is the second page of that invoice template. Other information that's needed along with the invoice and included in the invoice template are the description of work completed and status update. Here you'll note work that you completed during that invoice period, and also provide an update regarding the status of the tasks generally, so whether or not they remain on schedule and within budget. We recommend creating a template or customizing our template to include your letterhead, the allocated fund, tasks, and subtasks. And you can send that template to your grant manager to review and update as needed. So again, in order to dial in that invoicing, we're here as a resource. We can help with getting that final template established. I'll also pause here for any questions for a minute or two. Invoicing is kind of a beast, so definitely if you have any questions, feel free to throw those out now, or again, as you work through your first one, I'm sure they'll arise then.
Quiet group.
Yeah. Well, I guess if there's no questions now, I'm going to hand it back to Melinda to touch on available resources and the upcoming peer-to-peer workshops.
So yeah, so here I'm going to pop in a second to get to the chat.
I can get that, Melinda, too. Yeah.
So I'm popping into the chat. We do have a resources page on the SALC website. It probably needs a little updating, but it has some great resources on it. specific to planning. It has a lot of different ones, but also specific to planning, outreach, data and mapping, as well as ag-related organizations and miscellaneous reports such as the Cal-LACTA white paper, State of the Art on Agricultural Preservation, which is a great white paper. And then there's also included there as in that list is a link to DOC's Agricultural Land Preservation Story Map, which weaves together many of the division's different focus areas and includes case studies and a variety of other things. It's a really nicely done story map. I encourage you to take a look at it. And then the third item here is the flip book that was created by Amy and her team at Cultivate. And it's a great mix of resources, tools, ideas, inspiration for project development and community collaboration. I think probably if you worked with Amy, you're probably familiar with it. They are in the process of finishing up an updated version of this, which we're excited to be able to share with you once it's completed. So we realize some of these resources may need updating. If you have some suggestions or thoughts, we're always welcome. We're always interested in taking a look at them and seeing if they would be a fit to add on to our website. So I think it's important to give folks resources, and I think there'll be opportunity to share resources through the peer-to-peer workshops as well. So with that, I'll hand it over to Amy to talk about the peer-to-peer workshop.
Thanks, Melinda. My name is Amy McPhee with Cultivate, and as Melinda mentioned, I'm a technical assistant for the SALC program, along with Serena Unger and Joseph McIntyre, who we've worked with many of you, and it's great to see you on the call today. We are now helping the DOC put together some peer-to-peer workshops to help you all think about how to mobilize and put your work plan together. We did a few of these in 2021, and we found them to be really helpful for awardees getting kind of herding their cats and getting things going, and as well as the sharing of resources and also sharing of lessons learned of other successful SALC projects. The first workshop that we're going to be scheduling is tentatively scheduled for May 23rd, and that is a focus on organizing for success. This session will include lessons learned from other SALC projects, speakers that have been involved in previous SALC projects, and an opportunity for sharing information and to develop peer-to-peer relationships, which we think is really helpful in the SALC world. We will putting together a second workshop in September that will be focusing on outreach and engagement strategies, and from what we've learned from 10 years of SALC programs. And that, again, will have speakers and some lessons learned. So we hope you all can attend those. And thank you, and we hope to see you at these upcoming workshops. Thanks, Melinda.
So much, Amy, really appreciate it. Yeah, really enjoyed doing these in round 6. And we had a large cohort at that time, so it was really nice to be able to have people have those conversations about what really worked, what didn't, and some great tips for getting started and getting moving on your project. So really appreciate that. Also wanted to acknowledge Chandra. Are you still here? Yes, you are. Also joining us today is Chandra. Oh, you've changed your name. I'm sorry, Chandra Merced Richards. Is that right? Sorry, I forgot that you changed your name. Anyway, she's with UCANR, is also one of our technical assistance providers. It's been really helpful, mainly focused in the Southern California region. So thanks for joining us, Chandra. So with that, we'll open up for more questions if you have any, or thoughts, or conversation, or whatever you like. This is your time. So I kind of went through the materials we wanted to cover. If there's anything else?
I have a question.
Sure.
We've been getting great support, and we've been using like Amy and Serena, and thank you both for that, for getting us across the finish line. But is it time now for us, as we start working on our work plan and trying to finalize that and get the budget to match, to work more with Cassidy, because she's our person that's identified? So is it time for us to transition over a little bit?
a little of both, I would say, Gloria. And I think Amy's going to probably be reaching out at some point in the near future. Like their work is going to be kind of focused on helping you mobilize and get together with your, the stakeholder process and kind of figure out in terms of your work plan what's next. And Cassidy would be the person you'd reach out to in regard to getting your grant agreement together and all the sort of the grant management kind of pieces. So it's both and you've got a dual team for you to help out and to get started. Does that distinction make sense?
It does. And believe me, I'm not shy, in case you can't tell, about asking questions, because I want to do this process right and get the most out of it. So thank you for tolerating all my questions. I have one more, if you don't mind.
No,
And this goes back to the sort of the agreement process and everything, where you have people signing and, getting all the work plans. We're going to have to take ours to our board of supervisors. When in the process do you recommend we do that? Like after we both kind of have a verbal, like, yes, it looks okay to me, and then we go and do our process, and then we bring it back and send it to you to actually go through your formal process then?
Yeah, I would think so. I've had this question from another grantee too, because they have a March board meeting. So I think the best approach, and Cassidy, if you have other thoughts, please jump in. But my thinking is to get it to the point where I think I was going to actually run it through PRU first. So make sure we have the agreement between us, and then I think I'll run it through PRU just to make sure there's not going to be any problems there. But that's a great question. Obviously, we wouldn't want it signed at that point because they want to review it first. So we would want to make sure it's a very solid grant agreement in terms of grant manager and grantee being in agreement on it.
Yep.
So, I mean, I think actually now that I'm thinking about it, I think Ed, you and I decided that we'd get it to our point of being approved. You'd bring it to your council, they'd approve it, and then we'd start processing it through our contracting department at that point. Usually the things that we get bounced back, my only concern is if they were to have any changes they wanted to make. But typically their modifications, like if our contracting department wants any changes, are usually just small little things that really aren't material. I mean, they're more just little form-based kind of issues, I think. So
yeah, Yep, that makes sense. Our council has found just like 2 form-based things that they're just like, oh, and I think they're probably seriously just typos. And so they asked us to fix those, but we'll get the rest ready. And then Cassidy will probably hit you up with that. And just that way you can start taking a look at it and saying, this looks reasonable. And then we can agree to we start shooting it through your process and our process.
Yeah, that sounds great. And we can also, work on some of those draft documents, as that process is going on. And then I'll just wait for that. Yeah. To be
All right.
agreed upon on your end, and then we'll start putting it through our contracts.
You see Amy's look of relief on her face that you're going to be getting my questions now. Thank you all.
But Gloria, just to add on to what Melinda said, I think we're going to double team you for just a little bit here to get you mobilized. And it's part of our team's task is to help you mobilize. And I think we probably explained this to you before, but we're gonna help you kind of think about how to mobilize, and we'll be doing that with all of the awardees that were successful. So we're looking forward to that.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Any other questions out there? Hopefully everyone has had some conversation with a grant manager, so at least you're off to a start there, I'm assuming. Well, we're happy to stay on for a few more minutes if anyone wants to pop off. We're happy to stay, and if there's any individual questions that you have. Yeah. Feel free to take yourself off the mute.
Yeah, hi there. Hi. Thank you for the workshop today. Cassidy, could you just retouch on the in-kind reporting?
Sure. So generally for our match funding, we just ask for a match to date with each of those invoices. And so it just has to be an overall amount. We don't require supporting documentation for match at this point. We just ask that you maintain that internal to your own files so that if we were audited, that can be clearly demonstrated that it was met. We do have a template for that. So that can be provided, and then you can just send that over with each invoice kind of filling out in that template match to date. And we just want to keep an eye on it, make sure that it's generally occurring, at each of those invoices so that also if we were audited at any time, we've got an idea of where that match is.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions? Alec, you're a pro at this, so you don't have any questions, I'm sure.
Saves me from having to use up what's left of my voice at the moment.
Oh, uh-oh. Hi, Bree. Feel free to take yourself up and mute.
Hey guys, I don't know if you can even see my name on there. It says unknown user on my side.
No, it says Bree. And Bree, where are you with?
Sorry. This is Brianna Bacon. I'm the executive director at the Nevada County Resource Conservation District.
Perfect. Okay. Yeah, it just shows Bree, like the BRIE.
Like the cheese. Yep. I was just wondering if this document or the slideshow would be available. I've actually gathered all of our stakeholders together for our first kind of introductory meeting this Thursday. So we have a number of folks coming together. And so I just wanted to be able to tell them the overview of all this that's been so helpful. Would that be made available to us?
Yeah, I'll probably send it out either later today or maybe tomorrow sometime. In the next couple of days, I'll send a link to the recording and then also the slide deck.
That sounds great. Yeah, we're excited. We're going to have a kickoff meeting on the 25th to talk about what this means for Nevada County.
That's awesome. That's great. You're ready to roll.
We are. Thank you so much for this workshop today.
You're very welcome. Well, if there's no more questions, we'll give you 15 minutes back to go outside and get some fresh air. I was going to ask Chandra, is it pouring down there?
No, it stopped, but yesterday had some pretty hard rain and flooding. Most of the beaches were flooded.
Yeah, sounded like it was really bad. I'm glad you're safe.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your help with this. This was very, very helpful.
Oh, good. That's good to hear. Like I said, it was the first one. Usually we just kind of do it one-on-one with our grantees, but especially since we're planning on doing the peer-to-peer, I thought it would be sort of a nice way to set everybody up, just be working on stuff together. So glad it was helpful. Alrighty, well.